Throughout the history of man, there have been too many incidents that are too terrible. The idea of living them will cause any man to shudder. Moments in history that many will prevent from happening if they were given a chance. So in the spirit of that, what if you were given a superpower to foresee future incidents? If you had this power and you lived at a particular time in history of your choosing, what past horrible incident would you prevent? Here are 4 examples of what we think are some of the most moments in history we would totally prevent if given the power. The extinction of a species. Ecologists agree that Earth appears to be experiencing a mass extinction at present. These have happened many times in the past. The extinction of the dinosaurs is believed to have been caused most directly by a comet or asteroid impact. That event was nothing compared to the Permian-Triassic extinction, which may have been caused by a gamma-ray burst. That event resulted in 96% of all marine life and 70% of all land life dying. What has happened to plant and animal species while modern man has been on Earth pales in the shadow of these 2 events, and yet humanity in general is doing terribly little to maintain critically endangered species. Most humans seem to adore cuddly animals. Anything with fur qualifies, and we have many tastes in what animals are beautiful. The tiger is magnificent. In 2005, there were only 250 breeding Siberian tigers in the Russian wild. There are well over 10,000 in captive breeding programs around the world. Some people are trying to save species from extinction, while others willfully poach these endangered animals for the black market. Tiger genitalia is considered the ultimate aphrodisiac in some places in China. These magnificent animals are being killed illegally and at extreme personal risk for money and sexual gratification. In 2011, the western black rhinoceros was declared officially extinct. They, like so many other gigantic African marvels, have been hunted coldly and unsympathetically by humans out for a cheap thrill or what they thought was sport and danger. Black rhinoceroses are extremely aggressive and have terrible eyesight. They will charge headfirst into trees and termite mounds, thinking they see a territorial challenger. Males weigh as easy as 3,000 pounds. The record is 6,380 pounds. There are only about 4,000 left in the African wild as of this list. The reason is twofold. In 1900, there were several 100,000 in Africa, but English hunters toured Africa to shoot down the Big Five: elephants, rhinoceroses, Cape buffaloes, lions, and leopards. This lister goes hunting now and then for deer, squirrels, rabbits, and doves, and these animals are very bountiful and fairly difficult to outwit in the wild. The hunter must also be a good marksman. But in Africa, elephants and rhinoceroses are too gargantuan to have natural predators except for the very occasional lion. So, they stand still or charge in the presence of humans. There's no hunting involved. You can drive up to either species in a jeep in the middle of the day and take pictures. Khmer Rouge regime. The Khmer Rouge were members of the Communist Party of Kampuchea, and during their 4-year reign of terror from 1975 to 1979, they completely destroyed Cambodia, economically, politically, and demographically. They took advantage of the chaos following the Vietnam War to overthrow the Republican government and set up what their leader, Salazar, who named himself Pol Pot, called agrarian socialism. It was in reality a forced relocation of every single Cambodian citizen from cities to farms where they were forced to farm regardless of skill or health. They were starved to death, beaten to death, overworked to death, and tortured to death. Anyone deemed intellectual was immediately murdered to protect the regime. Anyone wearing glasses was deemed intellectual. These people were taken out into killing fields and hacked to pieces with machetes. Every single book that could have been found was burned, as was all money. All banks and even hospitals were shut down. The citizens were no longer given more than 2 bowls of rice soup per day. All religion was banned, and those adhering to any religion were prime targets for murder, including Buddhists, Christians, and Muslims, anyone educated in Western universities, and any ethnicity other than Cambodian. The most notorious details of this sorry moment in human history come from the S-21, now the Solvang Genocide Museum. It was a high school before it was taken over. The Khmer Rouge guards forced the prisoners to eat the guards' feces. The prisoners were forbidden from drinking water without permission, and if they did, they were beaten, sometimes to death. They were waterboarded, raped, their teeth and genitals executed, bled to death, drowned, and castrated with pliers. World War I. One of only 2 wars to make this list. This one does because of the hideous speed at which hostilities escalated in 1914, and because there is no single villain to blame. Humanity in general is to blame for this one. In retrospect, it appears as if every country in Europe was harboring a festering hatred for one another, and everyone was looking for an excuse to invade. The act that touched it off was the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Archduke of Austria-Este, by Gavrilo Princip, whose motive was no more complicated than a desire to prove his bravery to the Serbian army, which had rejected him for being too small and weak. Almost every nation in Europe had a treaty with another nation, and these treaties all said the same thing. If anyone attacks you, we've got your back. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, which prompted Russia to declare war on Austria-Hungary, which prompted Germany and Italy to declare war on Russia, which prompted the United Kingdom and France to declare war on Germany and Italy. Spain and, of course, Switzerland stayed out of it. The United States stayed out of it until Germany waged total war on international unarmed merchant ships, particularly Lusitania, and because of the Zimmermann telegram which Germany sent to Mexico urging it to declare war on the US. The British intercepted this memo, but Mexico, to its credit, did not dare attack the US. We can all agree that war is the epitome of human stupidity, and as wars go, World War I may be insurmountable in exemplary idiocy. War theory, if we may call it that, had progressed in terms of modern defense, but not attack. Both sides were armed with more or less with the very same weaponry, especially the Maxim machine gun, the first truly modern machine gun. It is belt-fed, fires the .303 British, the 8mm Mauser, or the 7.62 NATO, at a rate of 450 to 500 rounds per minute, sufficient to cut men in half, which is precisely what it did, tens of thousands of times for 4 years. About 15 million military and civilian died, unless we include deaths from the Spanish influenza, which was itself a direct result of the war. That puts the estimate at around 65 million. World War II. This war can be blamed mostly on one man, Adolf Hitler. Let us take a brief look at the motives by which he initiated global hostilities in 1939. Whereas Stalin was patently paranoid that he would lose his power, Hitler was not afraid. He simply carried a fuming rage which, in childhood, he directed against nothing in particular. He was imprisoned for his failed beer hall putsch, an attempt to overthrow the Kaiser government in 1923. While serving 8 months, he and Rudolf Hess wrote Mein Kampf, in which Hitler blamed absolutely everything bad that had ever happened to Germany on the Jews, all of them everywhere on Earth. Whether he actually believed this is open to debate, but there is no denying that he saw in Jews an outstanding scapegoat, one against which all non-Jewish Germans would rally. It worked, better than he could possibly have imagined. He emerged from prison a national hero, and 10 years later took control of the government. What followed was a nationwide brainwashing. Everyone began hating Jews intensely. Many of the Jews saw the trouble coming and left for England or America. Most stayed, hoping they would be saved. They weren't, until it was too late. 6 years later, Hitler made good on his promise to acquire Lebensraum for the German people by invading Poland. Britain and France immediately declared war on Germany. Russia made a pact with Germany because Stalin knew he could not conquer Germany at that time. Hitler bided his time before invading Russia 2 years later, in the knowledge that Russia's military was woefully inadequate. Japan invaded China for its resources, and in September 1940, Japan, Italy, and Germany became the formal Axis powers, solely because they understood their identical desires to conquer other countries. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, in retaliation for the US embargo on oil, iron, and machinery. The US then declared war on Japan, and there were declarations of war all around. Oh, what a merry world it became so quickly. After 6 years, 71 million people were dead. Rome, Paris, Moscow, Leningrad, and London were smoldering. Dresden, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Stalingrad, and Manila were obliterated. The most infamous aspect of the war will forever remain the Holocaust. It is also referred to as Hasoah, which is Hebrew for the catastrophe. Much has been said about it already on List First, so let us briefly examine Hitler's methods by which he remorselessly and unsympathetically attempted to eradicate an entire race of humans. His seething, abiding rage found in Jews the perfect target, and he set about in his political ambitions, surrounding himself with men who agreed, some for power, some out of rage or delight, all out of hatred that the Jews as a race needed to and could be extinguished. The Wehrmacht, for its part, had nothing to do with the Holocaust and had very little idea it was going on. They were an honorable institution, if honor just as compassion could be found in war. The Schutzstaffel, or SS, carried out the murder of 6 million men, women, and children by poisonous gas, shooting, beating, torturing, scientific experiments, systematic starvation, and overwork, on the pretense that Aryans were the superior humans and that Jews were no better than cattle. In which terms, the question was asked, do we feel bad when we slaughter cows for food? 1.1 million were murdered at Auschwitz, 700,000 to 800,000 at Treblinka, 600,000 at Belzec, 360,000 at Majdanek, 320,000 at Chelmno, 250,000 at Sobibor, merely because they were Jewish. Meanwhile, at least 750,000 soldiers and civilians died in 199 days in Stalingrad. That was the only one battle of the war.